I have an issue with that.
Yeah, I bet you do. But we also unearthed older research conducted at the very tournament where you played McEnroe, and it concluded then that grunting was of no practical use whatsoever. So the research seems to disagree with itself, although the theory that it does help is newer research. But you didn't grunt much. McEnroe grunted on 67% of his serves against you. Do you think it helped him?
I think it did. I think because I think maybe for reasons of habit, players get used to grunting, and if you tell them to stop grunting, it's virtually impossible to do it unless it was a concerted, conscious effort over time to stop doing it. So, but personally, I actually do think with any sort of physical exertion, an accompanying grunt does seem to assist, whether it's in the gym or anything that involves physical exertion. I think that is right. And I think the fact that it is newer research and more current, I think would add weight to the argument that it is helpful.
I was going to ask you if it applied elsewhere. Listen, I do need to ask you, the Serena controversy dying down, but I see this very thoughtful piece by Martina Navratilova in the New York Times today saying Serena has part of it right. There is a huge double standard for women when it comes to how behaviour is punished, but in her protests against an umpire, she got it wrong. She was being coached. End of story. That started it all. How do you view this, Chris Lewis, as a former champion player at that very top level?
Well, there's so many issues involved here. I mean, it's escalated into a gender issue. It's become a heated debate over here in the US, and people taking opposite sides of the debate. I think, firstly, just setting the context here, I think what the umpire did was perfectly within the rules. I think that the fact that her coach admitted to coaching on national television after the fact, and it was clear that he was coaching her, and in direct contrast to the rules, the umpire was absolutely within his rights to give her a warning. She knew that the next violation was going to involve a point penalty, and she was guilty of racket abuse. And there was no way around it. She couldn't deny that the umpire had no choice but to actually dock her a point. And then it's a little bit of a grey area as to what constitutes an abuse of an official in the third violation, when she called him a thief and said that he effectively robbed her of a game, and she was of a point, and then she was docked a game for it. In all three instances, in my view, the umpire was actually conforming to the rules. Now, as to her argument that she was being treated unfairly because she was a woman, and if a man had been guilty of the same behavior, he wouldn't have been penalized, I don't think there's any evidence to support that whatsoever. A little bit of research myself. At the US Open, there were 86 code violations issued to men and only 22 to women. Also instances of that very umpire being just as tough with Djokovic in a recent tournament as he was with Serena. So, in my view, I think the umpire was objective. He conformed to the rules. I think he had no choice but to issue the point penalty, and I think that there was some subjectivity in the game penalty, although I would tend to argue in his favour. I think she was out of line. Okay,
that's very interesting to hear the analysis of Chris Lewis. Thank you for joining us. Sorry we're out of time. Former Wimbledon finalist, of course, now living in New Zealand and now living in California. So there's not much time for our panellists to comment on what Chris Lewis said.
Oh, no, I was just going to wonder about the grunting thing, whether it was actually a psychological annoyance to the other player.
Well, that's what he was hinting at, wasn't it?
I would have thought that was exactly the point. It would really drive you nuts and you'd get angry.
Peter Elliott's been on the panel. Julia Whaipoti, thank you very much for coming on.
Tēnā koe, it was a pleasure. Tēnā korua, tēnā koutou, thank you.
Mā te wā, and thanks everybody. We're back tomorrow. Here's Checkpoint.
Tō te maira e hoa mā he kōrero kei te haere hei kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Welcome to Checkpoint. Tonight, how much do you pay for power? A government report reveals, well, it's probably about 80% more than you were paying in 1990. A new offer on the table for primary school teachers. The Housing Minister described their rental property as an absolute disgrace. Now the family living in the swamp house in Papakura has been evicted. Dozens of jobs could go to Duke Nisho's Kaitaia plant. Revelations of the bodies of a mother, grandmother and 3 little girls lay for almost a week in their Perth home before being discovered. Mandatory evacuations along the eastern coast of the US as Hurricane Florence approaches, and a Napier surfer tells us about being swept 10k out to sea.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Consumers are paying 80% more for power now than they were 30 years ago, and prices have risen faster than other OECD countries. But the first phase of the much-anticipated electricity pricing review has also found that, on the available evidence, the power industry is not making excessive profits. The review found that while consumer prices had increased 79% since 1990, over the same time commercial rates dropped by 24% and industrial prices have increased by 18%. The Minister for Energy and Resources, Megan Woods, says there are clear reasons for that.
There has been a shifting of some of those costs from businesses onto consumers, that we've seen that very much, and that would be one of the key drivers. But what we've also seen is that for some households that they are actually managing to constrain their electricity spends, that it's being experienced unevenly across households.
Megan Woods says she'll wait for the final report in May next year before deciding what action to take. Primary school teachers are unhappy with the Education Ministry's latest offer in their ongoing pay talks. The Educational Institute is putting the new offer to members in a ballot next week. It includes a 9.3% pay rise over 3 years, but omits the union's claim for smaller classes and for a special education needs coordinator in every school. Wellington teacher Joe Wilson told RNZ News it's not good enough.
I actually think it was quite disappointing. It's not just about the pay, and I don't think they've addressed all the other issues that the schools have, like the workload and the Senko. So they've only focused on the pay issues, and they haven't taken the whole package into consideration.
Joe Wilson says she would be prepared to go on strike for a better offer. The tenants of an Auckland rental described as a swamp house have been evicted. The Auckland Council deemed the Papakura home as unsanitary and unlivable and gave the landlord, Arvin Raj, 10 days to remedy severe drainage problems. Poor drainage created a swamp underneath the home, making it damp and mouldy and caused the property to flood. Dawn Robbie, who lives at the home with her partner and 2 young children, has told Checkpoint she's shocked to learn she's being evicted and is upset no reason has been provided. Most of the problems at the house have been fixed and the council lifted the unsanitary notice today. The government is looking to prosecute Mr Raj on behalf of the tenants. Union organisers say up to 50 jobs are on the line as Jukin Nisho revamps its Kaitaia tri-board mill. The company is to spend about $30 million replacing old machinery and modernising the mill, which employs 250 people. It says job losses will not be significant. But Jared Abbott of First Union says in a town where jobs are scarce, any cuts are significant.
We've heard a number bandied around as many as 50 jobs. We're hoping that will be minimised. We think that there's opportunities within JNL for them to hopefully relocate some of those workers.
Jared Abbott says some workers are nearing retirement age and may put their hands up for redundancy. But the union also hopes the company will move some of the workers to its nearby veneer mill instead of using cheaper labour from a hire pool as it does now. A world-first study has found elderly people are suffering injury or even early death because of over-medication. The University of Otago research shows elderly people taking multiple medications are twice as likely to fall and break bones. The research also found up to a third of people who suffer a broken hip die within a year of the injury. Lead researcher Dr. Hamish Jamieson says elderly people are particularly vulnerable to the side effects of drugs.
Some people are put on medications when they're younger, and when they're getting older and they're not metabolising the medications as well, they're still on the same doses. Other medications, such as sleeping tablets, work in the short term, but they cause effects such as drowsiness and confusion in older people, and it makes them much more likely to fracture their hip.
Hamish Jamieson says elderly people should regularly review medication with their GP. It's 5:04. Sport, the All Blacks were all set to welcome back Sonny Bill Williams for this weekend's clash with South Africa in Wellington until today. The midfielder had scans on his shoulder yesterday and was given the all clear to play after 3 months on the sidelines. His return would be timely with Ngani Laumape out injured and Ryan Crotty coming back from concussion. But the All Blacks assistant coach Ian Foster says Williams was unable to train today after becoming ill.
Sonny had a scan yesterday, he's all clear, ready to go, except he was sick this morning. so he didn't train this morning, but good news is scan's all clear, so now we've just got to get him back on his feet and training.
Ian Foster hopes Williams will be right to play on Saturday. The new Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua is yet to choose a captain to lead the side against England on Saturday. While not short of candidates, including incumbent Katrina Grant, who led the team through the Commonwealth Games, a leadership group could be appointed instead of a single skipper. Taurua says she'll make her decision by tomorrow afternoon, with a team vote the likely option to determine the final outcome.
One, what is our structure? Is it a leadership structure, or we're going with captain, vice captain, and then who those people are? We've taken a collective approach of the players voting on a 3-2-1 system, myself, CEO and also high performance. So, as they say, the people will speak as to who they want in those leadership roles.
Nolene Taurua. That's the news.
Sick passengers on a Virgin flight.
We were held up as we landed for about 2 hours. They said that we are under quarantine and you have to wait.
Bus troubles in Wellington sends demand for scooters through the roof.
A good 50%. I've had to find another supplier to keep up with demand.
A busy tour schedule for Harry and Meghan.
I looked at their itinerary and thought, thank goodness it's them, not me.
A right royal listen. Morning report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, disappointment over the Southern DHB's plan to solve the Wanaka midwife shortage. And after 10, photographer Michael Kenner, whose magical work documents landscapes around the world. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, showers clearing this evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Auckland to northern Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy with isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. South Taranaki to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine apart from the odd shower about the ranges of Nelson and Marlborough this afternoon. Bulla, cloudy periods and occasional light showers. Westland, fine, but cloud increasing tomorrow and some showers developing in the evening. Fiordland, fine today, drizzle developing tomorrow morning, mainly about the fjords, turning to rain in the evening. Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers clearing tonight, mostly fine tomorrow. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. We begin tonight with the price of electricity and its impact. Now, in 1998, when the Electricity Industry Reform Bill was being introduced, the National Government of the time said, and I quote, "The electricity reforms are about getting a better deal for all consumers, especially household consumers." Well, today, the first part of an electricity price review by this government found households have done least well. Since 1990, residential prices have risen by just under 80%. In the same 28-year period, commercial prices have fallen by 24%. The review found 100,000 households are experiencing what it calls energy hardship, spending more than 10% of their income on power. Homes with poor insulation are more expensive to heat. Again, they're most likely to be low-income households. We'll talk to the Minister after 6, but we begin tonight with Catherine Hutton looking at what we've learnt from this review today.
Holding a full-scale review into consumer power prices was a commitment written into the Labour and New Zealand First coalition agreement. Today, the Ministry for Energy and Resources released the first stage of the review, a discussion document which looked at what's behind rising power bills, particularly for homes. Megan Wood says the finding that many households struggle to pay their power bills was no surprise.
I sit in my electorate office in Wigram and Christchurch in the middle of winter and watch people pile in one after the other clutching their power bills that they can't pay. I know that we have too many families that electricity is simply too much of a component of their household budget through winter, and that's why we introduced the winter energy payment to address some of the most vulnerable people. It's why we've increased subsidies for insulation.
How much you pay for power and how much your power bill has risen depends on who you are. The review found residential power prices have increased 79% since 1990, but over the same time frame, industrial prices have increased by 18% and commercial rates dropped by 24%. That's a striking differential, but Megan Wood says there are reasons for it.
There has been a shifting of some of those costs from businesses onto consumers, that we've seen that very much, and that would be one of the key drivers. But what we've also seen is that for some households, that they are actually managing to constrain their electricity spends, that it's being experienced unevenly across households.
Across the power divide, National's Jonathan Young denies cross-subsidisation is a problem.
The issue is not around cross-subsidisation. That was a problem in the past. The issue is about an effective, competitive market where consumers are paying a fair price, and part of that fair price is having a good wage. And this is what we want in New Zealand.
The report says it appears there is a two-tier market developing between those who are able to shop around and get the benefit of competition and those who can't. It says low-income households often miss out on the early payment discount, which can be as high as 26% of a monthly power bill. The chair of the review panel, Miriam Dean QC, says it's important to strike a balance so that all New Zealanders benefit from fair and affordable pricing.
The market is a lot more competitive, so in fact many people are benefiting from more competition, but there are, as the Minister has said, a strong or a large number that are not. So it will be a matter in the next stage of really finding where the balance lies. We don't want to make the market less competitive for those that are benefiting, but equally we must make the market more competitive for those that are not.
One of the most controversial findings of the review is that the industry is not making excessive profits based on available evidence. Megan Wood says that's the important nuance.
We have gaps in the data set, which is spelled out in the report too, that there's a period, I think it's from 1999 to 2002, where there's gaps in some of the industry data that's available. So on the available data, that is the case.
On Wellington streets, there was a mixed reaction to power prices.
Most definitely, yeah. Got some big bills in the last few months, so yeah, I'd say it's far too high.
I've read a lot in the news about people that seem to have horrific power bills every month, and then friends who have much lower ones.
Me personally, no I don't, because I live communally.
I'll say yeah, only because I'm comparing it to when I lived in Australia, where we paid what I pay a month, we paid a quarter over there.
The public have until mid-October to give their views on the document, with the final report expected with the Minister in May next year. The Minister says she'll await the findings of the second phase of the review before deciding what, if any, action the government will take. For Checkpoint, ko Catherine Hattentene.
There's much to discuss in this review, and we will hear from the Minister after the 6 o'clock news. It's 30 minutes past 5. Thanks for being with us. There's a new offer on the table in the primary teachers' pay talks, a pay rise of 9%. In fact, it's 9.3% over 3 years, but teachers are already saying it's not enough, over 3 years being the key detail there. The Education Ministry says the deal is worth $500 million over 4 years. That's more than the previous offer that provoked last month's strike, the first by primary teachers and principals in 24 years, but it's still a long way from the 16% over 2 years the Educational Institute was originally seeking. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, asked teachers at Johnsonville School in Wellington what they think of this offer.
The Ministry's increased the annual pay rise it's offering most teachers from 2% a year to 3%, but it's less for new teachers who were previously offered increases of nearly 5% a year. The proposal doesn't do anything for workloads, and there's no mention of the special education needs coordinators the union wants to see in every school. Teacher Jo Wilson says it's not good enough.
I actually think it was quite disappointing. It's not just about the pay, and I don't think they've addressed all the other issues that the schools have, like the workload and the SENCO. So they've only focused on the pay issues, and they haven't taken the whole package into consideration.
So it sounds to me like you would reject this one?
Absolutely, I'd reject it, yeah.
Would you be willing to strike again?
Yes, yeah, I would.
Michelle Titchens is another teacher who's thinking of rejecting the deal.
It's not working with inflation and everything else. There's no incentive for people to join the profession, which is, as much as we have the holidays and so forth, there's still a lot that we do in our holiday time, in the sense of professional development, having to be back at school and all those kind of things. So yeah.
Would you be prepared to strike again?
That's a bit of a tricky one, that one. Not sure. Haven't decided upon that one yet.
Rosalie Anso is undecided. She says the offer is better for experienced teachers like herself, but it's new teachers who need the money the most.
If I'm thinking of the bigger picture,
then I think that our beginning teachers and I think some of our teachers on lower steps need a bigger increase. They're the ones that need the biggest boost because we want to get more teachers into teaching. So it's the beginning teachers that we need to be looking after.
But Rosalie Anso says she would be reluctant to strike again.
Not thrilled, no. No, I'd rather be here teaching, but I think we do need to make a stand every now and again about certain issues. For me, the issue wasn't the pay. It's about the conditions and it's about getting help for the special needs kids that are in my class. That's what I care about. For me personally, it's not the pay.
Bryony Waterman-Dick is a student teacher at the school. She says the pay offer won't attract more young people to teaching.
I think it'll deter younger teachers from coming into the profession, and if they do go into the profession, I think that it's going to make them more likely to get registered and then probably go overseas and teach.
The school's principal, Barry Schoen, says recruiting more teachers is critical.
We need to attract more people into the profession because there's a lot of people who are going to be retiring over the next few years. So therefore we've got to put effort into paying new teachers more.
But will 9% pay rise over 3 years, is that going to do it?
I suspect it probably isn't.
Teacher Andrea Gullick is disappointed the offer fails to deal with issues like class sizes, special education and workload.
I'd like to think we could get something else rather than just money, but I don't know.
Would you be prepared to go on strike to do that?
Yes, I think I would. Reluctantly, because I don't believe striking is necessarily the way to go, but I don't know how else to make yourself heard. Yeah, I don't like striking, but yep, I would if I think it's going to make a really big difference. If it's just going to make a tiny difference, no, I wouldn't, no.
The Educational Institute says it will start an online ballot on the offer next week and it won't be telling its members which way to vote. Results of the vote are expected on September the 25th. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Teachers, if you're listening and feel like telling us what you think of that offer today, text us 2101. 17 minutes past 5. The family living in a swamp house in Papakura, Auckland, of course, which the Housing Minister last month labelled Third World, have been evicted. Dawn Robbie has been living above a swamp with her partner and 2 young children for the past 21 months because the drainage at her home was simply not functioning. The swamp was damaging her underfloor insulation and making her home damp and mouldy, and as a result her family sick, and it was making her yard an unusable swamp too. Her landlord, Arvin Raj, hadn't done anything to fix the issues. There was almost unanimous outrage from you in response to the story. Auckland Council and the government shared your outrage too. The council deemed the house unsanitary and unlivable and gave Mr Raj 10 days to fix the problems or face hefty fines. While Tenancy Services is looking to prosecute Mr Raj on behalf of Dawn and her family. Now, the council inspected the house this afternoon. It's been 10 days. And Zach Fleming spoke to Dawn after they left and asked her what's been done.
Just had workers here, pretty much, ripping up the house, putting drainage pipes all throughout the whole property. And
when you say ripping up the house, what do you mean?
Oh, they just had a digger in here. They had 2 diggers in here, ripping up the ground so the pipelines can lead all together, or you know how there's where the water runs. So they're just doing all the pipelines to connect all into one rather than it all connecting under the house.
So they ripped up your entire yard?
Literally ripped it all up.
It rained yesterday a little bit. What happened at your house when it rained yesterday?
Oh, not much, to be honest. There wasn't any water leaking anywhere. There was actually no little puddles or anything. Nothing.
And nothing in this instance is good, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, I actually just didn't know. I'm hoping because of the storm water drains that, I showed you that was full of water. They've actually stuck the pipes into that. So I'm hoping that they've actually cleaned out the stormwater pipes.
Yeah, and there's your hope, and there's also the council as well, because the council gave your landlord, Arvin Raj, 10 days to do this, and they said that they would be back to check if he had done this in 10 days. Otherwise, he could be fined up to $200,000. And so the council has been there today, and what has the council said?
The council just was going over with Darren, I think, with the outside property, and I think they're just mostly happy that there's no water underneath the house anymore and that it's fully dried, because Daryl came inside the property. You can actually notice that there's no moisture or draft or the certain type of stench that you'd get if there's water underneath the house, like damp. that damp moisture. So there is still mould on the walls and in the bathroom, but I think Darren was the project manager, Mr. Prasad, was talking to Daryl on what they're going to do to the bathroom walls and the mould. And I think they're painting the window sills because of the mould or something along the lines of that.
So there still are some things to be fixed, but the council doesn't think their house is unlivable anymore.
Yes.
And what are you guys going to do, Dawn? I mean, now that it's being fixed and all those sorts of things, but...
Well, we got given a 90-day notice to the new property manager last Tuesday, so we have to actually vacate the premises on Monday, the 3rd of December.
So you've been evicted?
Yes, we got given the 90-day notice by our new property manager on Tuesday the 4th.
What was the reason? What was the reason given for that? Why have they chosen to evict you?
No reason. She didn't actually say that she was giving us our 90-day notice on the phone. She just did it by email.
How do you feel about that?
I was actually pretty upset. I was very upset, to be honest, because I complied with the 10 days of helping Mr. Evan Raj and having a project manager, then getting a new property manager, and then actually just helping out the landlord, and I'm still at a loss, to be honest.
What's happening with the court case that the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is helping you with now?
So pretty much they're just waiting on Evan Raj's side. So they've given him they've given the property manager, the project manager and Mr. Evan Raj a 10-day notice to give all the maintenance, reports to do with terrace, all the coming up and doing, house inspections, anything to do with terrace, they've got given 10 days to do it because I think they actually haven't been helping or complying. The investigators honestly believe that Evan Raj is not going to sit down and do a witness statement and that it will all mostly go through Evan Raj's lawyers. We probably won't actually physically see him, but I'm hoping the judge will ask him to come to court, or at least just own up to your actions, or have some accountability. Can't have your lawyers do it for you because then what the hell does that show, honestly? But still at the end of the day, I'm still paying rent. I've got now been a 90-day eviction. I've actually got to try and get out of this property. I'm trying to get out now, not trying to get out in the 90 days. But it's just really, really hard to actually try and do it all on your own. Imagine if I didn't have the media or the help of certain people. Imagine if I try to do it all by myself. Tenants and renters actually don't have a leg to stand on, and I hope the minister changes that.
The Swamp House tenant, Dawn Robbie, although as you heard, Dawn is being evicted, speaking to Zach Fleming. It's 23 minutes past 5. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for residents along the coastlines of South Carolina and Virginia as parts of the mid-Atlantic brace for what could be the most powerful hurricane ever to make landfall. Hurricane Florence could be the strongest in recorded history to strike the eastern coastline so far north if it maintains its current track, and cyclones don't always do that. Bridget Burke reports.
The calm before the storm. More than 1 million residents have been ordered to evacuate as Hurricane Florence is on track to hit the east coast of the United States, bringing with it torrential rain, powerful winds and potentially devastating flooding, making landfall as a Category 4 storm. This satellite imagery captured by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration shows rows of clouds swirling offshore as the hurricane continues on its path. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper urged an estimated 250,000 residents to evacuate the state's outer barrier coast, warning it would be an extremely dangerous hurricane by the time it makes landfall on Thursday.
The forecast places North Carolina in the bullseye of Hurricane Florence, and the storm is rapidly getting stronger. When weather forecasters tell us life-threatening, we know that it is serious. North Carolina faces 3 threats here. First, the ocean surge along our coast. Then the strong winds, which may be higher than the other hurricanes that we have recently experienced. And of course, inland flooding from heavy rains. And we here in North Carolina are bracing for a hard hit.
Residents in Wrightsville Beach were today boarding up their homes and securing possessions.
We do have a plan to perhaps evacuate. We want to watch it
through today and see what's happening.
Ali Tilgman, who opened a food and juice bar with her boyfriend 2 months ago, was closing early to prepare for the storm.
Hopefully we have a business to come back to.
States of emergency have been declared across North Carolina, South Carolina and Virginia.
Let me be clear. North Carolina is taking Hurricane Florence seriously. And you should too. Get ready now. Dare County is beginning evacuations. I think Hatteras Island today, and I think the rest of Dare County tomorrow. And we expect that other coastal communities will follow shortly. Florence is intensifying steadily. This storm is strong.
The largest threat to life from hurricanes is not the high winds. Flooding is the deadliest result of these storms.
Residents are heeding the warnings, stocking up on sandbags, food and generators. US President Trump tweeted, "The storm looks very bad. Please take all necessary precautions. We have already begun mobilising our assets to respond accordingly, and we are here for you." Mr. Trump cancelled a political rally planned for Friday in Jackson, Mississippi, due to safety concerns. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Now quickly to the harness racing scandal. There are lots of suppression orders here. Several people have appeared in the Christchurch District Court today. The 18-month police investigation, also known as Operation Inca, has rocked the world of harness racing since properties were raided and people were charged last week. 11 people have been charged as part of the operation. 9 appeared in courts across the country today. Our reporter Tess Brunton has spent the day in court, and I asked Tess who's appeared so far.
Well, to be honest, I can't tell you many of the names, as there is an interim suppression order for 7 of the 8 people who have appeared today. I can say that we have prominent Rangiora trainer, which is Andrew Douglas Stewart. He has appeared charged with 3 counts of race fixing. He's since been remanded on bail. He hasn't entered a plea, and he will appear on October the 2nd at 10 a.m. Now, that's when the others are expected to appear, but it's going to be a bit of a wait to see if we are going to have any of these names released.
Yeah, that's a lot of suppressions. What was it like inside court, Tess?
Well, it was absolutely packed. There was a lot of people out there, supporters as well as members of the racing community. Now, you should remember, this is, while we can't name anyone apart from Andrew Douglas Stewart, we have got a lot of high-profile harness racing members that are appearing at the moment.
And there was another person charged today as part of Operation Inca, is that right, who appeared in the Palmerston North District Court, Tess?
Yes, that's correct. So we have Manawatu Thoroughbred Racing Administrator Brent Wall. Now, he has pleaded not guilty to charges of race fixing, and he's also the first to have pleaded, made any kind of pleading in this case. And so he's expected to be remanded on bail until an October appearance date as well.
Yes, just to confirm what Tess said there, the names and any identifying details of 7 people have been suppressed until the 9th of October, pending appeals around suppression and identity to the High Court. 5:28, the Crown says the first person to go on trial for insider trading in this country was no Wolf of Wall Street. Instead, it says Hamish Mark Sansom was an opportunist who sold his shares in a road transport software company after getting a tip-off from a mate. But Mr Sampson's lawyers said he ignored the spin and he was able to discover by looking at the numbers that E-Road wasn't doing as well as expected in the American market. Edward Gay has been at the High Court in Auckland.
Hamish Sansom owned shares in Auckland-based E-Road in May 2015, a company which sells software that allows trucking companies to buy diesel road user charges electronically, and had recently broken into the US market. In his opening address to the jury today, the Crown prosecutor Mark Lowry said Mr Sansom received a text message in May 2015 from his friend and former colleague who worked for the company.
We see the text message reads, US sales not doing too well, time to sell up, confidential obviously.
The text was accompanied by an image of a confidential internal company report that Mr Sansom's friend was working on.
2 minutes later, 9:59 a.m, the reply is, "You're a bad boy, but thanks." That's the initial reaction 2 minutes after receiving the text message and the picture. A minute later, at 10 a.m, we see the second green box, another text from Mr Sampson saying, was going to sell down significantly anyway.
Mr Lowry said Mr Sansom set about getting rid of his shares. It was complicated by the fact the shares were held by Mr Sansom's trust, but he drove over town to hand-deliver documents and speed up the process. He sold 15,000 shares, reaping $51,000.
A few days after that sale, the company announced to the market what a company insider had told Mr Sansom a few days earlier, that part of its business wasn't doing too well. The announcement caused the share price of the company to drop, so suddenly the shares were worth less than they were when Mr Sansom traded.
They were worth a lot less.
On that day, its share price dropped 10%, and then over the next week, it was a total of 20%. And that was its largest fall since the company went public.
Mr Lowry said the trial came down to the text messages between Hamish Sansom and his insider contact.
The Crown is not going to attempt to paint Mr Sansom as some kind of criminal mastermind or the Wolf of Wall Street. He's not. His offending was unsophisticated, and it was opportunistic rather than premeditated.
In short, Mr Lowry said Mr Sansom was a cheat.
Insider trading is cheating, pure and simple. It cheats other members of the investing public. And not just stock traders who sit in high-rise buildings and wear shirts and cufflinks to work, but everyday New Zealanders who operate in an economy that relies on the existence of fair markets. Particularly those of you who might have KiwiSaver accounts, which tend to invest in share markets.
But Mr Sansom's lawyer, David Jones QC, said the case was not so simple. He said Mr Sansom was able to work out the numbers for himself and didn't need any tip-offs to know the company wasn't performing in the US as well as expected.
If you looked at the words, the spin, you could get taken in. But if you look at the numbers, the hard facts, you could see that things were not going well at all.
Mr Jones said the numbers were published at the company's AGM, well before what the Crown describes as the tip-off or the company's announcement.
The FMA want his head on a plate because they want a trophy. This was their first case under the new law, and so they want him. And so they're doing whatever they can to funnel the information that they want you to look at into something that is going to suit their case.
He said Mr Sansom was going to sell his shares in E-Road anyway.
That is not a crime. That is somebody simply using independent thought and experience and expertise and working something out for themselves. That is not a criminal offence.
The trial before Justice Fitzgerald and a jury has been set down for 2 weeks. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gay ahau.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. We're delighted to have your company. Coming up on the program, revelations: the bodies of a mother, grandmother and 3 little girls lay for almost a week in their Perth home before being discovered. The embattled Labour MP Clare Curran returns to Parliament, and the Napier surfer tells us about being swept 10k out to sea and surviving on his board for 6 hours before the rescuers found him. Lots of feedback coming in from teachers. Thank you. We'll bring you a sample of it before 6. Madison's next with business news. But here with the headlines is Katrina Batten.
A government discussion document on power pricing shows households pay nearly 80% more for power than in 1990. The Energy and Resources Minister, Megan Woods, has released a discussion document outlining what drives power price increases. It also says more than 100,000 households experience energy hardship, spending 10% more of their average income on power. Primary school teachers are unhappy with the Education Ministry's latest offer in their ongoing pay talks. The Educational Institute is putting the new offer to members in a ballot next week. It includes a 9.3% pay rise over 3 years, but omits the union's claim for smaller classes and for a special education needs coordinator in every school. Teachers are already saying the offer is not good enough. A world-first study has found elderly people are suffering injury or even early death because of over-medication. The University of Otago research shows elderly people taking multiple medications are twice as likely to fall and break bones. The research also found up to a third of people who suffer a broken hip die within a year of the injury. Union organisers say up to 50 jobs are on the line as Duke Nisho revamps its Kaitaia tri-board mill. The company is to spend about $30 million replacing old machinery and modernising the mill, which employs 250 people. The company says job losses will not be significant, but First Union says in a town where work is hard to find, any cuts are significant. One person has died in a two-car crash in rural West Auckland. The police say a second person has moderate injuries and diversions are in place at the intersection of Hunter and Waitakere roads and Waitakere and Bethels roads. The publisher of a book which is causing a storm in Washington has printed 1 million copies before it officially goes on sale tomorrow. Fear, Trump in the White House, by the veteran journalist Bob Woodward, portrays the President Donald Trump as prone to profane outbursts and impulsive decision-making and paints a picture of a chaotic administration. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Profane, what a lovely word. Thanks, Katrina Batten. No profanity coming from Madison Reedy on the other side of me with business news. Hi, Madison. How's the industry, the electricity industry, responded to the electricity price review, which you've brought down and have on the desk beside you?
If you'd like to have a read, I can leave it with you.
Look, I think people should have a read of it. It's a good read. It's pretty easy to read.
Oh, easy to read. It is pretty hard to digest, though, and actually understand what they're saying. So within that 88 pages, the electricity price review panel did have a lot to say just about the state of the industry. So I'll give you a bit of a kind of a simple breakdown of that. So some of the things that they sought to find out about the industry to do with its state. One was reliability of supply. Big tick for that one. Renewability, we have 80% renewable sources of our energy here, that being hydro and wind. They said tick to that as well, but they did mention that the remaining 20%, bit of a struggle to convert that. They also mentioned profits, so profits of the energy companies. Tick, but they did say so what they did was they looked at their net cash flow, said that no excessive profits there, although they did flag a lack of data, so that wasn't actually a final decision there. Competition, tick, so we have 36 retailers in New Zealand. They're the ones that sell the energy to consumers and businesses, 34 generators, a few of them do both. What they did actually flag there too is that they said the ones that do both, the top 5 companies, that they do have a dominance over the market. They have about a 90% market share, and that's only gone down from about 98% in the 1990s. And they also looked at some billing data from some retailers. What they did find, which we just heard in the news there as well, a big difference in what they called energy hardship. So that's those who were struggling to pay their power bills. Now, I took that to the industry today. The biggest electricity retailer in New Zealand is Genesis Energy. I took that idea to the CEO, Mark England, and he said that the industry does need to do more.
We do recognise that some sectors of the country are struggling to pay their bills, and as industry and as a country, I think we need to focus on it. It's important that consumers know they've got fair prices and that they've got control over their spend.
Why does it take a review and a panel to point that out for a company as big as yours in this market to say, let's do something?
Well, there's no definition of energy hardship in New Zealand, so I think one of the things the industry can rally around is defining what we mean by that. And in general, hardship and poverty is a challenge for the country as a whole. It's not specific to electricity. But we've got to play our role, and I'm sure we will. We'll rally around and work with our competitors and the governments to find ways in which we can support those customers. We already do a lot. We give them lots of information. We help them with debt management. And while it's a relatively small portion of the population, I think it's important for a sector like ours to take it seriously, and so we will.
What do you plan on doing?
We're going to work with the industry. We've got 6 weeks now to respond to this consultation, and obviously with the panel, and work out, I think, what kind of framework we need to put in place. It's important that we recognise it's not just about energy. It's about hardship generally, but we've got a role to play in that.
Mark England talking to Madison, who is beside me. The Minister's going to join us on the program to discuss precisely those issues too later on. What else have people been saying from the sector itself, Madison?
Yes, there were some other points in that review as well. The panel called out distribution companies, of which there are 9. Now, distributors are the ones that buy it off the network and then sell it off. And it said that they have outdated pricing structures, called out the quality of their governance, so actually pointed at their leadership there, said they have ageing assets and short planning horizons. Now, the lines company Vector, they've put out something today and they responded to exactly that. Their response was, we're not clear on the problem they seek to resolve. We already have a network with literally thousands of independently owned energy assets connected to it. It's in our interests and in the interest of consumers to ensure distributed assets can work within our network.
Although we've tried to have those discussions. In fact, we have had those discussions with Vector about their infrastructure in Auckland because of the couple of outages, right? Gosh, it's a fascinating business. Thanks, Madison. Nice take on that. I do think this is worth reading and it's available online.
It is, absolutely, on the MBIE website.
What happened on the markets today?
NZX Top 50 Index closed up a lot, nearly 2% tonight. That's 177 points. Big surge to close at 9,225 points. New Zealand dollars buying at 65.3 US cents, 91.7 Australian and 50 British pence.
Madison Reedy, nice work. Thanks so much. Right, let's go to Perth now, where it's been revealed that the bodies of a mother, grandmother and 3 little girls lay for almost a week in their suburban home before being discovered. Mara Harvey, who was 41, her 73-year-old mother, along with 2-year-old twins, Alice and Beatrix, and 3-year-old Charlotte, were found dead in a house in Bedford on Sunday. Mara's husband and the girl's father, 24-year-old Anthony Robert Harvey, has been charged with 5 counts of murder. The family has put out a statement saying the world is now a sadder place. Elizabeth Brown reports.
Anthony Harvey walked into a police station in the Pilbara region on Sunday, and whatever he told officers led to the grisly discovery in a house in suburban Perth, hundreds of kilometres to the south. The police allege he killed his wife and daughters and then a day later killed his mother-in-law, who was a regular visitor to the Bedford house. Western Australia Police Commissioner Chris Dawson says it's believed the killings took place on Monday, September the 3rd, nearly a week before the bodies were found.
We are still working through a number of timelines, but we are going to be alleging that he remained at the house for some days and then made his way to Panawanika.
Chris Dawson says the bodies of the 2 women were found in the kitchen while the girls were found in several different bedrooms. He told media that several weapons were used in the killings.
We're not alleging that any firearm was used. We're alleging that several weapons were used. Those matters are facts before the court now. I can't give definitive cause of death. We're still working with pathologists and forensics in terms of that. But what we are alleging is that a blunt instrument and knives were used.
In an emotional statement issued through the police, Mrs. Harvey's sister Taryn paid tribute to the victims, describing them as angels.
Beverly was a kind-hearted, caring mother and grandmother and was always there for her family. Mara loved being a mum and she loved her girls. She was so proud of each of them and was doing a great job of raising them. Charlotte was an energetic, bubbly, confident little girl who loved people and loved socialising. Alice was outgoing, adventurous and cheeky, while Beatrix was at times a little more quiet but gave the biggest hugs.
Distraught neighbours in the ordinary suburban street have spoken about the family and how they hadn't been seen in recent days. Alfie lived across the road and said there didn't seem to be anything amiss.
I always waved at them, and the 2 twins were always dressed the same. Beautiful little kids. You could hear them all day there in the back. There were never fights, arguments there, never, ever, ever. Not that I know, because Grandma was there every day. She do washing, do everything. She used to leave here about 4:30 in the afternoon. No issues. Perfect family.
Western Australia has been rocked by 3 mass killings in just under 4 months. Police Commissioner Chris Dawson says they've added to the tragic tally of domestic violence-related killings.
It's my sad duty to remind people that 23 people have lost their lives in WA this year in what are alleged to be crimes associated with domestic violence-related type of matters. So the State Coroner has a broader role and remit in terms of actually inquiring in terms of not only the cause of death but any matters that might be attached to that.
Anthony Harvey showed little emotion when he appeared in the Karratha Magistrates Court via video link, wearing a T-shirt, jeans and no shoes. When asked if he understood each of the 5 murder charges, he simply said, "I understand." He wasn't required to enter a plea and was remanded in custody to reappear in court on September 19th. For Checkpoint, call Elizabeth Brown, TNA.
Home again, the embattled Labour MP Clare Curran was back in Parliament today for the first time since resigning as a minister. The Dunedin South MP stepped down on Friday after being unable to answer questions about what official work she'd carried out on her personal email, that's her Gmail. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Flanked by 2 senior colleagues,
Clare Curran made her way to caucus this morning, but did stop to answer reporters' questions.
I've given the Prime Minister an assurance that I'm archiving all my Gmails and working through that at the moment, and they'll be publicly discoverable.
So all your Gmails that relate to ministerial work,
yes.
You can give that assurance?
Yes.
Will these be proactively released?
As I said, I've given the Prime Minister an assurance that I'm archiving them, working with her office to do so.
National's broadcasting spokesperson Melissa Lee says she's worried that Ms Curran will be selectively archiving her emails.
She is deciding what is relevant and what is not, but she's no longer a minister, so I'm a little bit concerned that we may not actually get to the bottom of it. What I would like to actually see is her being very open finally and give up all the Gmails that she has actually done work on, so that we can actually finally get to the bottom and know the truth.
Melissa Lee says Clare Curran should give up her password and let someone else decide what should be archived from her Gmail account.
Well, she did actually say that her staff had access to all of her emails, and I don't believe her staff actually had access to the Gmail. I think she should give that up to someone to decide what is relevant and what isn't. I don't think Clare Curran should be responsible for deciding what is relevant and what isn't.
Clare Curran rang the Prime Minister last Thursday night to tell her she was going to resign. Jacinda Ardern went on radio the following morning and was asked about Ms Curran, but did not mention that she'd already told her of her plans to resign. In Parliament this afternoon, Nationals leader Simon Bridges tried to corner the Prime Minister over her public statements that day.
When asked on News Talk ZB on Friday morning if she had considered cutting ties with Clare Curran, and she said no, had Clare Curran already resigned by that point? And if she had, is she satisfied, the Prime Minister that is, with the answer she gave?
Mr Speaker, yes. The question I was asking, are you considering cutting ties with her, though firing her? I said no. I was not firing her. I did not fire her. The Minister made a decision to resign from her portfolio.
The Prime Minister has also faced flack from one of her own MPs over the matter. Ohariu MP Greg O'Connor said on morning radio yesterday that Jacinda Ardern's handling of the events around Clare Curran's resignation could have been handled better. He told reporters this morning he'd apologised for those remarks.
It's pretty important to get it right, and I got it wrong, and I've apologised, and I've got the message.
What bits did you get wrong?
I got it wrong. My understanding of the events, I was wrong.
Jacinda Ardern says she welcomes any feedback from her MPs, but would prefer to hear it directly. Atu I te whare pāremata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Chris Bramalaho.
The Waitangi Tribunal has found the Crown lied to King Country Māori. Have I got the right story here, everyone? No. Have I shot forward one? No, we can do this. Thank you. The Crown lied to King Country Māori and launched an aggressive land grab that caused and is still causing them damage. Today, dozens of people gathered in Wellington for a presentation of the first part of a significant report into the Te Rohe Pōtai claims, which cover a wide expanse of the King Country. This is a major claim with some real grievances to be addressed. Our Māori news correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin was there.
After Crown soldiers invaded Waikato in 1863, Te Rohe Pōtai Māori in the King Country governed their land for the next 2 decades. Then the Crown, which was hell-bent on building the North Island Main Trust Railway, made promises to Māori it quickly broke. It's sober reading for Keith Aiken, the Deputy Chair of the Maniapoto Māori Trust Board.
Those agreements were made by our people, but within a very short time. Very, very soon after the railway line was laid and the main trunk line was complete. The land court was established within our area, and tens of thousands of hectares of land were lost.
In fact, from 1890 to 1905, Māori lost ownership of more than 250,000 hectares of land, or a third of the district. The Waitangi Tribunal says it was an aggressive land purchasing program, procured through questionable methods against the wishes of Te Rohe Pōtai. Laws were made to control sales and keep land cheap.
The impact of colonisation upon our people within Maniapoto was devastating, and so the ways in which families sought to counter that impact, was to keep a lot of that historical record to themselves. And it's been a hugely significant day because it has allowed those stories and those conversations to come out into the open again.
What those stories tell, according to the tribunal, is the Crown's significant breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi, causing serious damage to Te Rohe Pōtai. It destroyed the Māori community structure and led to enormous social, economic and cultural prejudice that continues to impact them today. Dozens of people gathered at Westpac Stadium in Wellington today for the presentation of Part 1 and 2 of the report. Kurawa John Reihana Kati drove several hours from his King Country home to be there.
I live out at Kawhia, on the Kawhia Harbour. I farm there on some of the land that our tupuna left us. Very little of it left.
He says he was apprehensive about coming, but now their stories feel real.
But I could feel the wairua, or the spirit of our ancestors, starting to emerge from what they were wanting, because we lived it with that as a young person. My grandfather, my grandmother, they spoke of these sorts of things.
The tribunal heard 23 weeks of evidence between March 2010 and February 2015, and 277 claims were made concerning Crown actions. As part of the inquiry, Angeline Greensill presented claims from the iwi of Waingaroa Harbour. Her mother was prominent Māori activist Eva Rickard.
I gave evidence on resistance because my mother was fighting lots of issues through her lifetime. My uncle lodged our claim in 1989, and so it's taken that long to get to a hearing and to this report. 31 years, but we're here, and I'm sure he's very happy where he is, and my mother will be looking down on us and thinking, well, what took so long? Now let's talk to the government.
Talking is already underway. The government is in treaty negotiations with Ngāti Maniapoto, the dominant iwi within the inquiry. A key recommendation from this report is that agreements made between the iwi and Crown in 1880 be reflected in their treaty settlement. The Crown says it's a significant report that it will have to go through carefully. Those present today paid respect to the presiding officer of the inquiry, Judge David Ambler, who died in November last year. Mo te hōtaka o Te Ahi Pō, ko Lee Marama McLaughlin tēnei.
On Sunday, Sean Turfrey went surfing south of Napier, that famous stretch of coast at home Moana. He'd been out there many times before, knew the coast, the water, many of the other surfers, but on Sunday something went wrong. The river water from the tuki-tuki, deceptive swells and waves, a wind that wanted to push him away from land, and before he knew it, Sean was out way further than he'd wanted to be and heading further out to sea fast. For more than 6 hours, he was pushed out into the Pacific, ending up about 10k from the coast, 10k out to sea on a surfboard. Eventually, the Hawke's Bay Rescue helicopter spotted him, and police, the Coast Guard and Maritime New Zealand did the rest. But when he realised he simply couldn't paddle against what was dragging him out, Sean Turfrey wasn't always sure he'd stand on land again.
Pretty much from then on, that's when I knew that's not an ideal situation to be in, and that's when I had sort of a few moments to decide to try and paddle either way to get around. And then the one I took to try and get back to shore, it just, the wind, currents and everything else. And I think maybe the swell, because it was going up and down, I was probably in the crest. From then on, it became a bit more of a, once I sort of lost track of the coast, when I knew, okay, this isn't working, paddling is pretty much not doing anything. That's when I sort of went into more survival mode. I just kept warm and kept paddling.
So Sean, you say you lost track of the coast. I guess there would have been times when you couldn't see the coast at all because you were between waves.
Yeah. That was the spot I was in. I could still see the Cape, but the coast of where I had been surfing, there was a couple landmarks from Mata Peak, a couple of things like that. So when I was sort of going down and coming up, they were sort of a gauge of how it sort of continually progressed to get further and further out. And that's when it got pretty hectic.
Yeah, as you describe this, I feel simultaneously terrified and seasick. But it seems to me that you kept your head about you, bro, did you? You obviously started thinking, okay, someone's going to come looking for me at some stage. I've just got to stay on the board.
Yeah, I mean, I completely lost the plot a few times, and just, you know, I was pretty angry that it was a Sunday, and I was looking around, and I was in the middle of the ocean. I was like, "What? This is not an ideal position to be in on a Sunday. This was not my idea." So yeah, no, it was a big mind game out there, just between yourself and the ocean, and you know, you're starting to think, shit, what could I have done, or what can I do? You know, what resources do you have? And there were nothing's out there. There's nothing there to use. So it was the only thing I could do was just stay afloat and just keep paddling, and that kept me warm.
Sean, there was a lovely article in the Don Post in which you described a skiing trip with your 5-year-old daughter, I think, in which things hadn't worked out as you'd hoped, and the words that she said to you on that occasion, which kept popping into your mind when you were out at sea.
Yeah, that was running through my mind a lot because of the words that she sort of said a few weeks earlier up the mountain. So that was at the moment where I was, you know, thinking, hey, is this how it's going to go down? Is this the end of, you know, this is it? And I was thinking, well, hang on, this is just water. And yes, it should just say, oh, you know, we don't give up, hey, Dad. And I thought, well, hey, if she can say that as a little girl, you know, I should be able to think on the same line. So, yeah, that definitely ran through the mind a lot. And, you know, partner back home and family and friends, and yeah, it was just a huge amount of things, just constantly thinking, hang on, you know, I've got to get back. I can't just stay out here.
Yeah, but to get back, of course, somebody had to find you. Somebody had to see you, get out to you, rescue you. Who did you see first or hear first, the chopper or the boat?
It was the chopper. But that was, yeah, because my vision had started to get pretty blurry from the salt and the reflection of the sea. So I knew I had to try and keep some sort of senses, because that was going to be my only chance, was a chopper. So I heard that first, but I couldn't see it for a while. I could hear it sort of hovering, obviously closer in, and then it came out and did a big, massive turn, and then it went past, and I thought, oh shit, there we go, it's gone. That's my one chance. And then it came back around and probably circled, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. And then, boom, I didn't even see the boat until it was within about maybe 50 metres of me. Yeah, and then at that moment it was, wow, I'm getting out of here. Yeah, and then, yeah, managed to get onto that, and yeah, so that was a pretty good moment, that.
Did you fall instantly in love with the people on board the boat, Sean? I would have.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it was, well, yeah, just catch my breath a bit, and everything was a bit blurry because of my vision. But, yeah, I was just obviously a bit tired, and, yeah, I was just so happy to just see humans.
Sean Turfrey, who is alive and well, as you could hear, 6 hours on a surfboard, 10k out at sea. So much feedback coming in tonight, and we are really grateful for it. It's coming in on 3 issues. Power prices. We're going to address power prices with the Minister as well as we can in an interview, obviously, although there is some substantive journalism to be done on this story. So we're going to do that after 6. Teachers and the situation of the Swamp House. When we did the Swamp House last week, lots of people said, well, why did she come to the media? Why didn't she just complain to the Tenancy Tribunal? Well, lots of you are now saying, well, the eviction notice given to the tenant of the Swamp House illustrates why tenants are reluctant to complain about the state of their rental properties. The upcoming review of tenancy laws needs to provide greater tenant security. That's from Michael in Tauranga. Someone, I'm a bit confused about this. I'd love your elaboration. He says a 90-day notice is not an eviction. Sad to see the great John Campbell. That's very sweet of you. Perpetuating the false so popular with many in the media. If they've been given 90 days to leave, in what way is it not an eviction notice? A text back and clarify. I'd be very grateful. Thank you. In terms of teachers, overwhelmingly, the teachers who are contacting us are saying, Nope, 9% ain't enough. But this from Tina, I hope I can fit it in. The Teachers Pay offer looks like it's not addressing such issues as support for high need students, SENCO and student-teacher ratios. These issues are the basis for teacher passion anger. Our school is a high decile one, however, we are still struggling with some extreme student behaviours. I really feel for teachers dealing with significant numbers of these damaged children. These schools need our support. I'll be considering striking for the bigger picture. And lots of you are saying, yep, the 9% over 3 years is what it is, but the bigger issue for us is more support in the classroom. So thank you, we really appreciate it. 2101, it's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten, tēnei. Consumer New Zealand says a new report showing that thousands of households are struggling to pay their power bills backs up its own research. The Electricity Price Review's first report has found more than 100,000 households are experiencing what has been described as energy hardship, spending more than 10% of their income on power. The review also found that households pay 79% more for power than they did in 1990. Consumers Head of Research Jessica Wilson says low-income consumers often miss out on the prompt payment discount or are forced to change to a prepay meter.
They're likely to have very little choice about where they get their electricity from. They can't shop around easily because no one may want to take them on if they've got a bad credit history, and they may have very little choice of retailer and may end up on a prepay power plan where they're paying higher prices.
Jessica Wilson of Consumer. Primary school teachers are disappointed with the latest Education Ministry offer in their ongoing pay talks. Teachers have told RNZ News the offer of 9% over 3 years is too little for new teachers. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The offer follows days of negotiations following last month's strike by teachers and principals. The ministry says the offer provides a bigger pay rise for most teachers than the previous offer, but less for new teachers. The deal will cost about $500 million over 4 years. But teachers have told RNZ News it doesn't go far enough. They want a deal that lightens their workload, provides more help for children with special needs, and more pay for new teachers. The Educational Institute says it will hold an online ballot on the offer next week, and it won't be telling its members which way to vote. Ko John Gerritsen, tēnei.
A University of Otago study has found New Zealand's elderly are over-medicated and suffering early injury and death. The World First study shows elderly people taking multiple medications are twice as likely to fall and break bones, Annika Smith reports.
The University of Otago research shows elderly people taking medications for sleeping, pain or incontinence are twice as likely to suffer a fall than those unmedicated. The research also found up to a third of people who suffer a broken hip die within a year of the injury. Lead researcher Dr. Hamish Jameson says the elderly are over-medicated because of high dosages or the continued use of short-term drugs like sleeping pills. He says elderly people are particularly vulnerable to medication side effects and should regularly review their medication needs with their GP. Ko Annika Smith, tēnei.
Union organisers say up to 50 jobs are on the line at a kaitaia mill. The owner, Jukin Nisho, is to spend about $30 million replacing old machinery and modernising the Triboard mill, which employs 250 people. It says job losses will not be significant, but Jared Abbott of First Union says in a town where jobs are scarce, any cuts are significant. Mr Abbott says some workers are nearing retirement age and may put their hands up for redundancy. The union also hopes Jukin will move some workers to its nearby veneer mill instead of using cheaper labour from a hire pool as it does now. National's broadcasting spokesperson Melissa Lee says the former Labour Minister should not be the person to decide which of the emails from her personal Gmail account are archived. Ms Curran stepped down after being unable to answer questions about what official work she had carried out on her personal email. She's assured the Prime Minister that she'll archive all of her emails that she sent using her personal account. Melissa Lee says she's worried that Ms Curran will selectively archive her emails.
Well, she did actually say that her staff had access to all of her emails, and I don't believe her staff actually had access to the Gmail. I think she should give that up to someone to decide what is relevant and what isn't. I don't think Clare Curran should be responsible for deciding what is relevant and what isn't.
National MP Melissa Lee. The publisher of a book which is causing a storm in Washington has printed 1 million copies before it officially goes on sale tomorrow. Fear, Trump in the White House by the veteran journalist Bob Woodward will be officially released tomorrow in both hardcover and e-book form. The book is based on interviews with current and former White House staff and portrays the President, Donald Trump, as prone to profane outbursts and impulsive decision-making and paints a picture of a chaotic administration. The publisher, Simon & Schuster, says it's reprinted 6 times to meet the extraordinary pre-order demand. An Australian couple who searched for a boat online are now the proud new owners of a former New Zealand warship. Paul and Wilma Adams have sailed the decommissioned Royal New Zealand Navy dive ship Manawa Nui across the Tasman to their hometown of Newcastle. They bought the ship, which is built for deep diving missions, for a few $100,000. The couple plan to use it to help clean up and secure the oil and fuel which is leaking out of shipwrecks in Micronesia and the South Pacific that sunk during World War II. It's 6:05. Sport, back-to-back losses to Argentina and Australia have made the Springboks anything but confident ahead of their test against the All Blacks in Wellington this weekend. Rather than talking up their chances, the focus for the tourists is all about avoiding another heavy defeat. Coach Rassie Erasmus has made no secret of the fact his job is under threat should the All Blacks win handsomely, and 60-test veteran Francois Lowe says despite their poor run, the public expectation doesn't change.
To get a victory over here would be fantastic, especially where we are right now will be huge for us as a team. It'll be massive back home. It is our biggest fixture. Should we lose, should we not get the victory, we'll have to go back and look at where we can improve, try and get our show back on the road for the remainder of the championship.
Francois Lowe. Meanwhile, the All Blacks were all set to welcome back Sonny Bill Williams for this weekend's test until today. The midfielder had scans on his shoulder yesterday and was given the all clear to play after 3 months on the sidelines. But he's become ill and has been unable to train, although assistant coach Ian Foster is hoping he'll be better in time to play. The International Tennis Federation is defending chair umpire Carlos Ramos after the controversial women's final at the US Open. Spanish official Ramos penalised Serena Williams 3 times during her loss to Japan's Naomi Osaka, and she was fined $26,000. Williams' behaviour during the final is being hotly debated, and after the match she claimed she didn't receive the same treatment as male players. But the ITF have released a statement saying Ramos acted with professionalism and integrity and followed the rulebook. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights there's a window on the world of comedy in Northern Ireland. And this week's After Dinner speaker is our mathematician Dr. Dylan Mayhew, who wants to acknowledge some award-winning number crunching. On Nights it all starts after the clock strikes 7.
What about Catherine yogurt and kimchi and kombucha and all of those buzzwords?
Probably the best thing to do is have a variety of different foods. A healthy diet will actually help to promote our intestinal health.
That's Lately with Karen Hay on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, showers clearing this evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Auckland to northern Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the central high country, fine. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy with isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Southern Taranaki to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, mainly fine, apart from the odd shower about the ranges of Nelson and Marlborough this afternoon. Buller, cloudy periods and occasional light showers. Westland, fine, but cloud increasing tomorrow and some showers developing in the evening. Fiordland, fine today, drizzle developing tomorrow morning, mainly about the fjords, turning to rain in the evening. Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers clearing tonight, mostly fine tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. Let's return to the story we began the program with an hour ago. Is power affordable in New Zealand? That's a question posed by the first phase of the electricity pricing review released today. It's 80 pages, it's online. It's worth a read if you're interested. The answer, it seems, is, well, it depends on who's getting the bill. For residential consumers or households, prices have risen nearly 80% since 1990. That's excluding inflation, by the way. In contrast, commercial prices have fallen by nearly 25% over the same period. Energy and Resources Minister Megan Woods says the report shows despite the increased competition in the energy retail market, and there is increased competition, those who can least afford to are paying the most for electricity.
I think this is one of the first reports that we've had produced that isn't just for energy insiders, that this is very much written with the end consumer in mind, and I think is a lot more accessible than a lot of the reports we get on the electricity markets, which tend to be quite technical and complicated, and I think this is a really accessible report. Some of the most striking elements in terms of the substance are the pricing, the percentage increase that we've seen since 1990, but I think the piece that really jumps out is the two-tier electricity market that the report's seeing develop here in New Zealand, which fits really neatly with what recent reports in the UK and Australia have also shown.
Yeah, can we look at the prices? And the figures on page 19 are critical, I think. Residential consumer prices rose at an average of 2.1% a year. So they were 79% higher in 2018 than they were in 1990. Commercial prices over the same period dropped by 24%. So residential prices up 79%, commercial prices down 24%. That's extraordinary. Why is that?
Well, I think one of the things the report does is pull that apart really well in terms of those residential and commercial prices, and it's one of the things that we're really looking for feedback as we head into phase 2. There's several reasons. Some of them are explained in the report, such as some of our particularly big electricity users don't use the distribution network. They kind of get it a lot closer to the source, that they simply, plug straight into transmission for big electricity users. But that is certainly a question we want to tease out more as we go into phase 2. That I think one of the things that we're seeing is that is a big shift between the two different groupings.
Yeah, and isn't that about the electricity companies trying harder to win big customers, and therefore there's far greater competition, which means that the sort of price cutting that Max Bradford promised in 1998 is actually taking place in the commercial realm. It's just not taking place in the domestic realm.
Well, I think one of the really interesting things that this report has found, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the commercial realm benefiting and the retail overall not benefiting to the same extent. But one of the interesting points that this report makes is that for some people, those most able to pay their power bills, actually, the market's working really well. They shop around, they switch, they pay their prices, they pay their power bills on time every time and get up to a 26% prompt payment discount. Much more likely to live in a newer, well-insulated home, may have put some solar panels on the roof, all those kind of things that mean that actually for some people the market is working well, and it could be that about 3% of your average income is being spent on electricity. But then we're seeing for some of our most vulnerable households that 10% is putting the 10% they're spending on energy is putting them into energy hardship.
Yeah, and let's turn to page 25 where this stuff is addressed. 6.1% of households, 103,000 households spent more than 10% of their income on domestic energy. And they are disproportionately likely to be households that can't afford to do that, and they are disproportionately likely to have children in those households, right?
That's right.
Okay, so this is a disaster for those households, that electricity is costing them so much.
Absolutely, and that was one of the drivers behind this report. This was, of course, the need for this review was something that we agreed to as part of our coalition agreement with New Zealand First, but it's something that all three parties of our government wanted to explore. What is it that's driving these prices, but importantly, what does it mean into the future as technology changes, and what do we need to be putting in place in terms of a plan so that we're ready for those changes and that we don't open up larger divides between the haves and the have-nots as we go forward. But you're absolutely right. Energy hardship is something our government is committed to addressing now as well as in the future. We've put in place things like the winter energy payment, and we've also increased subsidies for insulation because we know that health outcomes are premised on people having warm, dry homes.
Yeah, if we look at Part 2 context, page 9, and we see that payments by consumers to electricity suppliers totalled $8.8 billion in the year to June 2017, $8.8 billion. The government got $1.7 billion of that, or 19%, as company tax, dividends and GST. In other words, on the one hand, you were saying, look, yes, the cost is too great, and yes, there are very serious consequences of that. On the other hand, you're earning $1.7 billion from the sector.
Yes, but we're also a government that looks at the other side of that ledger and asks what we're spending by the fact that people can't heat their houses properly. What are the health costs to us as a country? And that's the way we're viewing this. We see people being able to have warm, dry homes is absolutely critical to the well-being of our country, so that we're also looking at the costs involved with that and why it is that we've initiated this report. And this is very much the problem definition report.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, no one's saying these companies shouldn't pay tax. But the fact of the matter is that when people pay their bills, $1 in 5, roughly, is going to the government.
Yes, and we're a government that's prepared to look at whether or not that's being shared equally and whether people are being charged fairly for their electricity. So that's not an issue for us. The fact that some of that revenue is coming back to government. We've made a commitment to have a look and to ensure that we're looking at all parts of our electricity sector, from the point that it's generated to the point that someone turns the kettle on their bench, to see where those costs are accumulating and where it is that we have to seek remedies to make sure people can afford to heat their homes.
I'd like to move on to something else, but just before we do, one final question on this. So this is a discussion document. It is the first report. When do you think that we will see some material responses to this that will lead directly to people who can't afford to pay huge sums of money for electricity not having to pay such great sums?
Well, submissions on the review are open through to the 23rd of October. The panel is looking at having a final report to us by May. I'll need to consider that. I'll need to discuss it with colleagues. I'll need to put it through cabinet processes. But look, we're not wanting to muck around with this. We're going to be looking very seriously at those remedies and what it is we need to do to fix things. This was a piece of work that we initiated right at the beginning of our government. It was underway before Christmas last year, getting the terms of reference drawn up and the work begun on that. It's something that we've kind of leant into as a government because it's a priority for us.
Thanks, Mr. We really appreciate having you. Can I just ask you to change portfolios briefly? And the Natural Disaster Fund that you and I have discussed before on Checkpoint, which was over $6 billion in 2010. This is EQC's war chest, effectively the government's kitty for meeting the cost of natural disasters. $6 point something billion in 2010. Last time we spoke, it was less than $500 million and heading south. What is it now?
It's currently at $171 million, the latest advice I've heard, which I guess on the plus side shows that actually we're settling some claims.
Yeah, but on the non-plus side, on the minus side, you're running out of money.
Oh, look, this is something that we've always anticipated, as you've indicated. We've discussed this many times, that we've had the initiating letter from EQC that the Crown guarantee is going to be required. So that's something that we're prepared for as a government.
OK, so what you are saying is the government is standing behind the Natural Disaster Fund, and if you need to write out a cheque, you will.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what we've said consistently from the very beginning that we got into government, that we've known this day was coming, that we've been openly discussing this with EQC. I think I've talked about it with you several times. And look, we're gearing up in Q1 next year that we'll probably need to initiate that Crown guarantee.
We're still trying to work out what we don't know, right, in Christchurch, and that is the stuff that the scopes missed first time round, the damage that people don't even know they've got. Where are Treasury at with their projections around those figures? What do you think is the extent of your liability that people don't yet even know about? And I guess Onsolds is the most obvious example. We looked at that with the Christchurch homeowner last night. Do you have some figures around what that might be yet?
Look, no update since last time we talked about this. That what we do know is that in terms of the Natural Disaster Fund, in terms of what we've paid out, and what we're seeing in terms of the 3,600 that we've got there in terms of the re-repairs. So we're gearing up to be able to meet those. As you know, that we've got some very broad estimates from Treasury, but what I'm most interested in is working through those claims and getting them settled and seeing what they actually are. Because I think for a number of years that we've been dealing in hypotheticals and theoreticals in Christchurch, what I'm most interested is us getting actually action and seeing claims settled.
Megan Woods ending the interview in her capacity as EQC Minister. It's 19 minutes past 6. Let's go to the north, where dozens of jobs could go at Jukunisho's Kaitaia Tri-Board Mill when the Japanese-owned forestry company overhauls the ageing plant. The Tri-Board Mill is the town's biggest employer, 250 people on the payroll in a town that desperately needs those jobs. Lois Williams reports.
Jukunisho announced plans today to spend about $30 million modernising the Tri-Board Mill. That'll secure its future, the company says, but the downside is it'll have to shed staff. JNL's New Zealand manager Dave Hilliard broke the news to the workers at the mill this morning.
I don't think it's a great surprise to them that changes need to be made. But what it does give, though, is certainty for a future. You know, I mean, the rumour has been in the north for a long time that the plant would close. Well, it is not going to close.
Dave Hilliard won't be drawn on potential job loss numbers at the Tri-Board Mill until unions and staff have had a chance to look at the revamped proposal. He says they won't be significant, but Jared Abbott of First Union says the word is about 50 jobs are on the line. And in a town where jobs are scarce, that's a lot.
We've heard a number bandied around as many as 50 jobs. We're hoping that will be minimised. We think that there's opportunities within JNL for them to hopefully relocate some of those workers.
Jared Abbott says some workers are nearing retirement age and may put up their hands for redundancy if Jukunisho bolsters the compensation it's offering. But the union is also hoping the company will employ some of the workers at its nearby veneer mill.
Literally just over the road from the Tri-Board Mill where they're making people redundant, and we are aware that there is a large contingent of long-term casual workforce there provided through a labour hire company that we think would be a good opportunity for them to make permanent jobs, good jobs in that region.
Dave Hilliard says the $30 million investment will result in a safer and more efficient mill that will be one of the Far North's largest employers well into the future. But one thing that continues to hold it back is uncertainty over log supply. Forest owners have been selling their logs to overseas buyers in recent years because they're offering high prices, even for immature forests. Other Northland mills have warned of a growing gap in the log supply that could hamstring the processing industry if it's not sorted. New Zealand First campaigned on measures to guarantee logs for local mills, such as a tax on exports or a quota system like Canada's. New Zealand First MP Shane Jones, now Minister of Forestry and Regional Economic Development, says he's onto it.
It's one of the issues that MPI or Te Ururako are currently working on. I've been told that we're not allowed a log tax because it offends some international rule. We are working on an option of warehousing, but we can't make that call till we get the advice. And secondly, we are looking at registering all logmongers to ensure that they're not shortchanging Kiwis.
And those logmongers would include some of Mr Jones's relatives. Iwi, including Te Rarawa, have sold logs over the wharf in recent times, but that iwi's chair, Hami Piripi, says Jukunisho is hugely important for the Far North and all forest owners need to make sure the company's needs are taken care of.
We know that they've been there a long time now, and I'm sure equipment's starting to age, and so we have been expecting some sort of rationalisation. But I think that we're going to try and embrace their ongoing development, because the truth is we need them in our community.
Hami Piripi says it's unfortunate that the Kaitaia mill will have to shed staff, but it's a comfort to know that Jukunisho is prepared to invest $30 million in the future of the Far North. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
It's 23 minutes past 6. A second summit between the US President and the North Korean leader is now, it seems, on the cards. Donald Trump has had a personal letter from Kim Jong-un asking to meet again. The pair held that unprecedented summit in Singapore in June aimed at denuclearisation, but it's been criticised for being short on concrete details about how North Korea would give up its nuclear weapons program, and no evidence that it has indeed begun to do so. The BBC's Caroline Rigby has this report on meeting number 2.
This is what Kim Jong-un is hoping for a repeat of, another face-to-face meeting with the President of the United States. The White House press secretary told reporters the North Korean leader made the request in a letter to Donald Trump.
It was a very warm, very positive letter. We won't release the full letter unless the North Korean leader agrees that we should. The primary purpose of the letter was to request and look to schedule another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process of coordinating that.
Negotiations over the regime's nuclear program appeared to have stalled following the two leaders' historic summit in Singapore in June. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo even cancelling a scheduled trip to North Korea last month. And in August, a report commissioned by the UN Security Council found North Korea had not stopped its nuclear and missile programs, violating UN sanctions. But the White House insists this letter is evidence of progress in Washington's relationship with Pyongyang and demonstrated North Korea's commitment to the denuclearization of the peninsula. The White House also points to a recent military parade in which the North did not show off its nuclear arsenal and a series of other events which they say offers further proof the regime is moving in the right direction.
The president has achieved tremendous success with his policies so far, and this letter was further evidence of progress in that relationship. A number of things that have taken place. The remains have come back. The hostages have returned. There's been no testing of missiles or nuclear material.
So when and where might this follow-up meeting take place? Well, the White House has refused to be drawn on that, saying we'll let you know when we have further details.
Caroline Rigby in Washington, 6:25. Ko te timatanga tēnei o te wiki o te reo Māori. The theme of Māori Language Week this year, kia kaha te reo Māori, or keep the Māori language strong, is a challenge for us all to give the language a go. Well, dialect is one of the distinct markers of any language, and this is no different in Te Ao Māori, offering a unique insight into iwi and hapu across Aotearoa. However, as more people learn Te Reo Māori, which is entirely welcome and encouraged, there are fears that the language will become homogenised and iwi dialect will be lost. Te Mana Kōrehi reporter John Boynton filed this report.
The dense ancient forest of Te Urewera is one of the most isolated regions in the country, making it the perfect environment for a unique dialect to flourish. Māori language expert Sir Timoti Karetu grew up on the outskirts of the Ngāi boundary at Waikare Moana.
We weren't a much loved part of the country, and we were difficult to get to. So in our isolation, I think the language survived. In my youth, nobody spoke English terribly much in the whole community, from one end of Tūhoe, the Waikare Moana, and all the way through to Waimana.
And Tūhoe developed one of the most distinctive dialects in the country.
The principal characteristic is that the NG has become a straight N, but not throughout the whole of Tūhoe. In northern Tūhoe was very much the case, and I think this younger generation is reverting to that.
So Narua Wahia becomes Narua Wahia, Whangarei is Whanarei, and so on. Across the Cook Strait or Te Moana o Raukawa, Ngāi Tahu formed its own unique dialect. Hannah O'Regan, who has been at the forefront of reviving the dialect, explains the main dialectal difference for her iwi.
The most identifiable and probably well-known characteristic is the use of the K instead of the NG. So when you have the term karanga, using the Kaitahu dialect, it will be karaka.
People often freak out, Hannah O'Regan says, when they hear the Ngāi Tahu dialect.
You can see it in their eyes sometimes if you're speaking Māori and they stop and you can see this kind of questioning going on as to whether or not, hold on, have they got it right? What are they saying? They're saying it differently.
In Northland, Māori educator Evelyn Tobin says the Ngāpuhi dialect also possesses its own special characteristics.
One of Ngāpuhi's distinct dialects is to in fact drop the W and overemphasize the H. And so instead of pakarongo, we on occasions hear hakarongo.
Sometimes it's not dialect which marks tribal differences, Miss Tobin says, but the use of different kupu and kiwaha, or words and sayings.
Good example is the pronoun for two people. The more common known word is korua. However, in Ngāpuhi, there is also an alternative pronounced kaurua, and it's quite unique to Ngāpuhi.
Timoti Karetu says it's becoming difficult to maintain tribal dialect when te reo teachers come from different tribes.
My crystal ball tells me that probably 50 years or 100 years from now, there probably will be one standard form of language, I think, and dialectal variations will probably disappear.
Evelyn Tobin hears younger Ngāpuhi speakers using the tribal dialect and says iwi radio is also key in keeping it flowing in te tai tokero. And for her, the Ngāpuhi dialect is a part of who she is.
It is my identity, it is my heritage by virtue of who my parents are, who my grandparents are. It's still my heart song.
Hannah O'Regan says the fight to revive the Ngāi Tahu dialect is worth it when she hears her daughter use it while studying for her exams.
As she was reading, she was reading it in the Kaitahu Mita, and I just had a moment where I was incredibly proud. Felt like, wow, 20 years, yes, we're there. It was effortless.
He mihi tēnei ki oku whanauka o Kaitahu, ki oku whanauna o Ngāi Tūhoi, me te iwi nui tonu a Ngāpuhi e hakarongo ana. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko John Boynton aho.
Hei roa anō tako mō nei anei. That's all for now. Butchered slightly. I apologise. He a popo. See you tomorrow. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. We really appreciate your company. On behalf of our excellent and hard-working team, kia ora, rawa atu. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night and we'll see you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Consumer New Zealand is backing up a new report showing thousands of households are struggling to pay power bills. The latest Education Ministry pay offer has disappointed primary school teachers. An Otago University study says the elderly are over-medicated and are more at risk of injury. A National says Clare Curran can't be trusted with the archiving of her personal Gmail account. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Blood Orange is the recording name of British-born, New York-based musician Devonte Hines. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing his dislocated new album Negro Swan in the sampler. I'll be discussing a high school musical from Long Island brothers the Lemon Twigs and a new anthology celebrating one of British pop's greatest arrangers. That's in the sampler tonight at 7:30, part of Nights with Brian Crump on